Okay, good morning everybody. It's 9:30 and time to resume this inquiry. Can I just confirm that the live stream is up and running? Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, yesterday I heard the appellant's evidence on highways, and today I will hear the appellant's evidence on master planning from Mr. Thornton. Welcome, Mr. Thornton. Which I'm hopeful will conclude this morning.
Oh yes.
Just a couple of procedural matters first. I see that the leader's statement has been added as a core document, so thank you for that. I realise there's been a lot of frantic activity in the background, and there will be today as well on the Section 106 and conditions and building heights and so on. And I just really want to encourage the parties to work as closely as possible to reach as much agreement as possible on those matters. To add to that workload, there's one matter that I've just abjectly failed to mention the last couple of days, which is the SIL compliance statement.
Yes.
But I'm hopeful that's already in hand. Good, thank you. Good.
I mentioned that to the team earlier in the inquiry.
Good.
So
Thank you very much for anticipating that. That's appreciated. Good.
And so your encouragement vis-a-vis building heights, I think, has reaped a rich reward, because we've now got an agreed position, as I understand it.
We have, sir. That's,
Excellent.
details of that have been emailed to PINS this morning.
Brilliant. Excellent. I'm very pleased to hear that. Good.
Two sets of planning conditions, the majority of which are agreed between the parties, and as mentioned yesterday, where there are areas of disagreement, we've highlighted that in the note.
Fabulous. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Good. That'll be my weekend homework then. Right.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
Has it come to this?
Right. Any other procedural matters that we need to discuss before we move to Mr. Thornton's evidence? No.
Not from me, so no.
Okay. Thank you. You comfortable, Mr. Thornton?
Absolutely,
Okay.
thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Krakowski.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Thornton, as you know, has a proof of evidence, which I hope you have to hand. And otherwise, in terms of documents, we will, or Mr. Thornton, forgive me, will be doing, if you like, a page turn of certain key sections of the master plan, which is core document 1.16. You've got it there. Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Thornton, if I could have you introduce the inquiry. On the first page of your proof of evidence, you explain that you're the founding director of 5+ Architects, you're a member of the RIBA, and you set out your various qualifications and experience on the first page of your proof. Are those details correctly set out?
They are, sir.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. And I wonder whether I could just ask you, first of all, in a series of a few points which we're going to take in chief, if you could just give us a little overview as to how long you've been involved in seeking to master plan the allocated site.
Absolutely, sir.
Pickerings Farm.
I first walked this site in 2009,
2000.
when employed originally by Taylor Wimpey to look at the site. This was when it was safeguarded but not allocated, and so I was originally personally involved in the work of the development statement to enable the site to be allocated, which happened in 2015. There was then a pause, and then in 2018 I was still available and accepted the appointment to continue that master planning work, to include master planning, design codes, and to outline applications.
Thank you very much indeed. And I wonder if you can just help with an overview of the process in relation to preparing the master plan, and in particular, given some of the observations, comments, and otherwise that were made on the first day by local residents, if you could just help the Inspector, please, with the degree of engagement with the local community.
Absolutely,
please.
yes. It's very much something I enjoy and something that I've spent a lot of time on personally. We didn't do that much public consultation for the original development statement, but in 2018 that was recognised as something that hadn't been fully engaged with, so we set about a visioning process in 2018, the summer thereof. We held various events which documented in the Statement of Community Involvement. In particular, we had a number of events at the Methodist Hall, the Methodist Church up in Kingsfold. That was local to the community, a really good, useful venue. And that allowed us to talk to people on the site around the site. And interestingly, people that wanted to come onto the site as well. For example, there was a church that was interested at the time. So a number of events there. As we then moved forward with a formal vision for the site, which was built on a lot of those comments and observations, we then held a number of consultation events in the Penwortham Town Centre Hall, number 9 on the plan, and held a number of events there over a number of years. Some of those were formal consultations, some of those were drop-in sessions, some of those were meetings for landowners, some for specifically people not landowners, and over the course of, again, a year of talking to people, we developed, refined the master plan further. So I've sat in the living rooms of a number of people on site. We've discussed the relationship of the development, walked to their back gardens. We've talked to people to the north of the site on some of the roads just north in Kingsfold and what the effect would be on them. And so, yes, we've thoroughly engaged with a number of the residents.
Thoroughly engaged. Thank you. And I think you've really already given us a bit of a preface to the next point, which was I just wanted to ask you to what extent the engagement, if you like, was genuine. So if as and when points were made, were they considered or ignored? What was the process in that regard, please?
Absolutely genuine. And again, a lot of personal conversations between me and residents around. So, for example, some residents brought to our attention technical issues such as drainage. A number of the drainage ditches across the site work when well maintained, don't work when not well maintained, and how the proposals would affect them. Some people have septic tanks which are right on the border of, is it in their land, is it in our land, and so making us aware of some of the features. Some genuine concerns. In one of the earlier master plans, we had a location for a pub down at the bottom of Moss Lane, and a couple of the residents were like, that's not a great place because people will walk from that pub through the public footpath up Moss Lane to Kingsfold, and at 11 o'clock every night what we don't want is lots of people walking past our front door when the pubs tip out. So we removed the pub from that location. So yes, there's been a lot of constructive engagement to make sure that this suits as many people as possible.
Thank you very much indeed. And of course, as we know, there was a previous master plan which was submitted to the local planning authority for its agreement, if you like, and the local planning authority didn't agree it for various reasons. And we find ourselves with a master plan which is before this inquiry alongside the applications which have been appealed. And I just wondered if you could just help, please, with this in overview terms. To what extent has the current master plan sought to address the criticisms made by the council of the previous master plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I was present at that meeting where the master plan was refused. I therefore benefited from the hours of discussion, debates, points raised about the master plan, which were crystallised in the 9 reasons for refusal at the time. That's set out in my evidence in paragraph 66.
On page 22, there's a 9-point summary. Yeah.
Thank you. And in terms of which of those elements related to design, 2 we have addressed, and 2 we have demonstrated that we are well in compliance. Now, the first that was brought up was building heights. I'm very grateful that we now have an agreed position on that. The second, public open space. There was criticism that there was insufficient public open space, and we have demonstrated that the applied master plan before us has twice as much public space as policy requirements. The retention of the orchards, that is now new for the new submitted master plan, highlighted in orange, which are now kept and retained in full. And then the retention of trees and hedgerows. The trees on site have been very carefully looked at, surveyed, classified as category A's, B's, C's. Inevitably, in order to make a connection onto Penwortham Way, there are groupings of category A trees and hedges all the way down that edge, and so it would be impossible not to remove some category A trees. And there are other locations where we've very carefully considered, such as the edge of Lord's Lane, in order to get a link road through, a spine road through, a tree would have to be removed, so we've looked very carefully at which single tree would give us the best width to get a vehicular path through.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Good. And if we move on to the master plan as it is now, and we all know obviously that we have planning applications for the major part of the allocated site, but not for its entirety. And we also know, it's not a matter for your evidence, but we also know that it's agreed that the situation is that one can do that. One can bring forward applications for part of the site, and one isn't required to bring forward an application for the entirety of it. Now, with that in mind, the question arises, well, what's the role of the master plan? And you might recall that in our opening, I addressed this in paragraph 10. I put this particular paragraph to Dr. Price, and he agreed with it. So I'll just have your position on it as well. And I said in opening, and Dr. Price agreed when I asked him about this, that given that the policy doesn't require a single planning application, the underlying purpose of requiring a master plan is to ensure that as and when planning applications are made for developments of parts of the allocated site, there is an overall strategy for the wider area which individual applications should be consistent with, so that the individual parts facilitate rather than inhibit or preclude bringing forward the greater whole. That's what I said in paragraph 10 of the opening. Dr. Price agreed. Do you take any different position?
I also agree with that.
Good, thank you very much indeed. So with that in mind as the agreed role of a master plan in a case like this, I wonder whether we can just have I don't know whether it's going to be a canter, perhaps a trot, through the master plan which is in front of the inquiry. That's core document 1.16. And really I'd just like you to sort of take us through a number of the key aspects of it, but remembering obviously the entire document is in front of the inquiry. The inspector might or might not yet have read through every page of it, but that's for him obviously. And so I wonder whether perhaps usefully we might start with the vision, which is section 2 of the document. And we have various statements made in relation to a vision for the site, beginning at page 7. And I think that's right, each vision for the overall allocated area is then addressed, if you like, from page 9 onwards. So would it be sensible perhaps to start at page 9 with just a few words about each of these key vision statements?
Absolutely, sir. I can take you through that. So page 9 in both paper and PDF. The first vision is that the place should be rooted in the existing context. And to paraphrase, there is already a rich tapestry on the site. There are already lanes, there are already public footpaths, there are already interesting field boundary patterns. And so to make sure we don't take an eraser to all of that, a lot of master plans might simply rub out the contents on the inside of the site and think not about what is there. But this is a place rooted in that existing context, the existing people on the site and around the site that use the site for dog walking, equestrian and other uses. So making sure that we fully engage and understand the existing context is vision 1.
Okay, then vision 2 on page 10.
Vision 2, less so about the physical attributes, but potentially the mix within the site. It should be a place to settle down, a place for the future. So when you're considering where to live, where to bring up a family, are there the right mix of houses? Are there small houses, big houses, somewhere that I can move my aging mother in next to me? Can I consider it a place that I call home, really? So a place to settle down and all the tests that come with that.
Thank you very much indeed. And the third vision at page 11.
Absolutely. A new neighbourhood. The master plan sets forth a location for a new neighbourhood, a local centre with a mobility hub adjacent to the school, which again, the co-adjacency of these facilities is something that is a good thing. And in terms of making sure that is accessible, yes, it should be accessible to the new occupants of the master plan, but also a nod to the fact that there is a rich community in Kingsford to the north, and so that gravitates and drags that local centre slightly north, and allows it to be within 750 metres as the crow flies of everybody within the site. If you walk about 1 second, 1 minute, 10 to 15 minutes walk is the maximum walk from the edge of the site to the local centre.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Then on page 12 we have the fourth vision.
The fourth vision is about connection, and really connection is the one biggest thing that underpins this site, the ability to connect areas within the site but also beyond the site. There's a number of rich connections. The Penwortham walking and cycling route runs through the site. There are a number of public rights of way that run up and down the site. There are the lanes. There is access to the various cycle routes and cycle networks. This site's a bit of a gap in terms of cycle networks in particular, and so starting to heal and fix some of those is important, but making sure we're using all of those good routes, connections, bus routes, public walking routes to make sure that this is a well-connected place, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. And then we have the fifth vision, which is on page 13.
Absolutely. More and more so activity, steps, walking, getting your 10,000 steps in a day. This master plan has embedded in it a number of things to encourage activity. It has the right number of laps and leaps in terms of dispersed children's play areas. It has larger play areas in and around the local centre. We have sought to master plan a walking fitness track, running track around the edge of the site, which includes both the land allocated and the safeguarded land. That's part of the point that this master plan covers both the allocation and safeguarded land, so we've tried to include that to make that as big a route as possible. But yeah, in terms of making sure we get out of our cars, make sure we walk, as I've said at various meetings, it's got to be better to walk your children to school than it is to get in the car.
Thank you very much indeed. And in the same chapter, over the page, at page 14, there's a reference to Garden Village principles. Can you just help us briefly with that, please?
Absolutely. A good planning principle to use the various metrics from Garden Village principles. Garden Village is roughly 1,500 up to 10,000, so it's just on the cusp of a small size in terms of Garden Village principles. We run through them on page 14, and again, it chimes with a lot of the things we've already said. So rather than it being a separate vision point, it's more that the Garden Village principles are embedded into all of the vision we've already talked about. Some are not for master planning issues. There are various issues of tenure and the like embedded in Garden Village principles, which we haven't incorporated, as that would be something for the future.
All right, thank you very much indeed. And then if we move forward quite a bit in the master plan document to section 7, which is the master plan vision itself, and that begins in terms of pictures and words at page 26. And again, I just wonder whether we can do a page turn with you, and perhaps taking a moment longer and a moment less on the more and less relevant items here. But page 26, please. First of all, can you just help us with what that is seeking to address?
Absolutely. Page 26 looks at really the blank piece of paper, what is there at the moment. It's very much what we presented in some of those early visioning and consultation sessions with anyone that wanted to turn up, to be honest. And what you notice when you look at that pattern is there is a little bit of a gap in connectivity. There's a good network of public rights of way to the south from the end really of Moss Lane, and there are good connections to the north, but there's a bit of a gap, and so what we have chosen to do is put the local centre into that gap to mend some of those connections to make sure that the connections work well. So I think that's really the purpose of the diagram on page 26.
Thank you. We turn the page to page 27.
And again, this sets out our work in terms of open spaces, public spaces, play spaces, and this sets out our really understanding that the best way to set out lots of play spaces is to make sure they're spread across the site, and so we've incorporated a number of opportunities for leaps, laps, and nodes of public space.
So just help me, because before we turn the page, we are going to come to public open space over the page. So this particular diagram, if we're looking at page 27, we are is entitled Pedestrian and Cycle Links. You've mentioned the open space, which is indicated by the, I'm sure there's a technical term, but the blobs. So what about the pedestrian and cycle links on this diagram?
Really, this diagram shows that they are everywhere. Yes, we have highlighted the lanes as the active travel routes, but we've also included many green lanes and green routes throughout the site. Every road on the site obviously has a footpath. A number of the roads are designated pedestrian priority, so the walking across the site is not just one or two specific routes, but we need to give people choice to which way and what routes they would choose.
Thank you very much indeed. And then we turn the page to page 28, green infrastructure and public open space. So just a few words about that, please.
Absolutely. I think all I would draw your attention to is the numbers really in the top table, where we have set out the contribution required for 1,350 dwellings for the master plan and what the master plan is proposing, which is where I get that roughly double in terms of green infrastructure and open space. Thank
you very much indeed. And then perhaps a bit more technical, so to speak, on the next page we've got the drainage network. Not sure we need to say that much about it.
No, I think we need to face into the fact that some areas of the site do flood. There are photos that residents have shown us of that, and that was useful to understand what and why and how. Some of that is due to maintenance, which they will happily agree with, that the ditches are not best maintained, but we do need to deal with some of those surface water issues. So the master plan deals with two issues. The first is surface water that we know about that already floods, and we've scooped that up and put it in a basin to the north, and then runoff from our own development. As inevitably there will be an increase in some hard surfaces, we will need to make sure that that is sustainably released back into the network. So there's two types of surface water, some for existing flooding issues in surface water and others for rainwater issues we create.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And over the page, last page in this chapter, page 30.
Absolutely. The hierarchy of streets, the main spine road, the secondary roads in terms of enhanced streets, informal streets and pedestrian priority streets. That network showing that there is a multitude of routes for people to choose across the site.
Thank you very much indeed. Then building up then with all of that in mind, we turn to chapter 8, the development parameters, and we find on pages 32 and 33 parameters set out, land use on 32 and page 32 and building heights on page 33. Obviously page 33 will need to be read in conjunction with whatever has been agreed between ourselves and the council with that regard, but just a word or two about the parameters, please.
Absolutely. Really, this is the formal what goes where, what use classes, where flood storage goes, where we are not recommending development underneath the pylon corridor, and areas to the front of the site adjacent to Penwortham Way, access points and the like. So that sets out the more kind of technical, dry elements of the master plan.
All right, and then finally, I think we come to the master plan itself, which is on page 35 of this book, as in drawing various points together. So just a brief overview.
Yes, I'll let people read the key for themselves, but in terms of a scheme, it is accessed by car, by cycle, by pedestrian routes. There is a well-considered entrance point at figure 3 where we've looked at the best route into the site in terms of existing hedgerows, views of the pylons, to come down really to the gateway between the two number 11s. That really creates the sense of arrival to the master plan. I've arrived at the lanes, here I am, this is the development, and taking you through then what Dr. Price mentioned could be a nice route, tree-lined route, suds route, swales, through up to the village centre at number 7, which really forms the heart of that master plan.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm going to move to a very precise point, because there are a number of hospital passes to you or to someone else in the team, and I suspect this one is probably you. Can you just help us on this is open bracket, closed bracket, but bus routes and the bus gate?
Absolutely. The master plan itself, in completeness, sets out a desired internal loop shown in the darker yellow on that master plan, and the key, which would allow a bus route that would be circular, that could come in and come out away from the lanes. As the scheme develops part by part, that may not be able to be installed in the first instance due to land ownerships, and so we need to consider others. So there is also consideration of a bus gate that is located up at the village centre. So just where the number 10 on the plan is, if you look at the big green, the dark green dot that has the number 7 in it, then there is the number 10, and to the right of that there is the opportunity to bring forward a route onto B Lane at that point.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Good. Now then, so that's a few words about the master plan itself. I wonder whether I could just ask you to say a few words, perhaps to correct the record actually, about the internal review of the master plan by a team at Homes England. You address this in your proof at pages 33 and 34, and you indicate at your paragraph 91 on page 33 that there's an internal specialist master plan review panel at Homes England, and they, as it happens, review schemes against building for a healthy life that we heard a great deal about the other week, last week. And you indicate it was presented to that panel, the master plan, and then there was a follow-up meeting, and the outcome of that is summarised in your paragraph 96, I think, which takes us over the page. There are 9 points. Now, to the extent that it was implied, and perhaps it wasn't, perhaps I was just being overly sensitive, but to the extent that it was implied that this process is a bit of a soft touch because it's Homes England, it's internal, I mean, I think this probably is the right phraseology. You were on the receiving end of this process, so can you just help us, please, as to how rigorous or otherwise it is?
Absolutely. It was professional. We do CABE reviews as they were at the time. We do design reviews with local authorities, independent and otherwise. And one always prepares for a design review in the same way to make sure that all the information is available, that it is clearly presented. And we, including the client team from Taylor Wimpey and Homes England, worked together on that presentation to the MDD panel. So it did not feel as if it was a friendly, kind of chummy panel. It very much felt a professional, independent review.
Thank you very much indeed. Good. And then I think final areas I just want to ask you about is, as we know, there's a reason for refusal. Number 5, forget the policy points. They've been addressed by others and will be addressed again next week by us. But in the 5th reason for refusal, there's an assertion, if you like, that the master plan isn't up to scratch, if I can put it in that way in my colloquial terms, doesn't meet the policy requirements. We've been, if you like, wondering quite what that means. Before the inquiry, we were, as the inspector would know, pressing for some explanation of what those words mean, and there was, in due course, or eventually, I think probably more fair to say, an email from the local planning authority which set out some specific points. Now, you address this in your proof at page 35, so I wonder whether we can just turn to page 35 of your proof. It's paragraph 102, and the email set out some points, and you here repeat them, if you like, so we can get our bearings. The first of which we needn't worry ourselves too much about, because it's a broader point about whether or not you can bring forward individual applications rather than a single application for the whole allocated area. But in terms of the master plan itself, the sort of rolling their sleeves up points, you know, what are the criticisms? And we see they come under various headings, 4 of them. And I just wanted you to say a few words to summarise your position in relation to each of them. Obviously, as the inspector would know, you deal with each in detail in your proof itself, but The first of those points were concerned connections. So just help us, please.
Absolutely. In terms of the master plan, there are numerous connections as we have laid out for various modes of transport, whether that be car, cycle, walking. So we feel that the connections for the master plan are well shown, well indicated, and well set out.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. And then character was the next one, and a specific comment or concern, or whatever it might be. It was thought there wasn't a local context study to underpin decisions set out. And this is actually a point about the design code, I think, rather than the master plan itself. But anyway, just help us with this, please. Did you go into all of this blind to the local context, in ignorance of what's around the site in question?
No, not at all, sir. Since I have been walking the site since 2009, I am very familiar with the aesthetics of the area, the typologies of the area. Some of those are more historic, some of those are more new. Particularly the northern edge near Kingsfold is relatively new, and so we are aware of the context on the site and around the site, and have visited a number of the properties as well. And in terms of the character, we set out 4 character areas within the master plan that reflect some of those local vernaculars, in particular Bee Lane character area to the north, picking up on the types of properties there. Some are less influenced by context. We talk about the edge to the east of the site, which actually has a railway, has some more industrial type buildings, and so there is some flexibility in the character to make suggestions. That's what we've done as creative individuals. In terms of the detail of a character study, there can be a whole stream from not very much detail to is it a brass door knocker on a door. We don't advocate that this should be a very detailed context study. Because of the longevity, we have 10 years for this master plan to evolve, and how we design houses in 5 years' time from now, how we deal with car parking in 5 years may evolve. So we've taken a middle ground of context.
All right, thank you very much indeed. And then penultimately, existing development was raised as an issue. That's in terms of integration, so the point was said to be. So can you just help us, please, in relation to that?
Absolutely. Spatially, we've made sure that we are offset by certain distances. In terms of the height parameters, we now have an agreed position in making sure that we reflect appropriate heights adjacent. There are some technical issues around land raising and lowering and the like, of which can all be dealt with very sufficiently within the boundaries within the applicant's land. So the existing development has been considered.
Thank you very much indeed. And the final point was parking, which, I mean, might be a little bit schizophrenic, because the point that's made in the email is an underestimation of the extent of the use of the private car, coupled with a lack of coherent parking strategy. As it's become at the inquiry, it seems to be a criticism that if you like, the appellants have said, well, we would work to ensure that parking is no more than the maximum allowed for. So it's been said, if you like, well, you're not being ambitious enough because you're just referring to the maximum, although the email itself is saying you've understated the amount of parking you need, but there you go. So can you just help us, please, on parking?
Absolutely, you're right, that parking, we've generally taken a policy position. That may change over the lifetime of the master plan, so we wouldn't want to create any tension between local policy and the master plan. There are various tangential references to parking in the design codes in terms of visitor parking not being more than 5 in a bay, being in positions of good observation and surveillance. So there are some tangential references, but you're right, the general policy position is the fallback.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. So that's the evidence in chief.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Ponter.
Thank you very much, sir. Morning, Mr. Thornton.
Good morning, sir.
You've been involved in this site for a very long time. Probably the longest of all in the room.
I believe so, sir.
I think your proof, if we just turn to that at paragraph 18, which you'll find on page 8,
Yes, sir.
refers to that initial involvement, which was to develop an initial master plan and development statement setting out how the master plan site could become a residentially led mixed-use development. That was the initial exercise. And as you say, that at that time the appeal sites formed part of a wider area of land that was safeguarded in the previous local plan. Is that right?
That's correct, sir.
And the exercise that you undertook back in, well over a decade ago, was part of an effort on the part of your clients to secure an allocation for the housing, for a housing site in what is now the current development plan, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, one of the components of the development plan, I'm going to come back to some of this stuff with Mr. Alsbury next Tuesday, but one of the components of the development plan, obviously, that then followed on from that, the next thing that happened in development plan history was the production of the core strategy. And that was examined back in 2012, wasn't it, I think?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. And if this is for Mr. Alsbury and you don't know about this, then do tell me. But just so we get the history in place properly, when the draft core strategy was submitted for examination, no land at Pickerings Farm was identified for residential development, was it? Do you know that or not?
Not sure I do know that. I know
Okay.
there was an interaction with the SLA at the time.
Okay, that's fine. It might be that I come back to Mr. Alsbury with that. What happened was, I'll tell you what happened.
You're not giving evidence.
The
are you,
Central
by any chance?
Lancashire authorities who produced the core strategy promoted a change that included land at Pickerings Farm as a strategic location. Does that ring a bell with you?
It does.
Good. And that change ultimately was accepted, and we know that in the core strategy this area is identified as a strategic location. Now, the work you did in support of that change, you mention in your page 8 that we were just looking at, you refer again to it on your page 11 of your proof, at paragraph 31, where you say that a development statement was produced in March 2011. Do you see that?
I do.
And that included the production of the initial master plan for the site, didn't it? When I say the site, I mean the wider area that was being promoted for allocation.
Yes, sir.
Can we have a look at that initial document? So, in fact, we can look at the plan that you, before we turn up the document itself, let's just look at the plan that you produce on your page 11, because that shows graphically what was then being promoted, doesn't
That's correct, sir, yes.
in that 2011 initial master planning effort. And just to note that at that time, what was being suggested were 3 main vehicular access roads, one from Penwitham Way. It's very hard, certainly on A4 size, it's quite hard to see the key, but there are some dotted lines, heavy black dotted lines with arrows.
Yes.
One comes out onto Penwitham Way.
It does.
One goes out onto the B Lane Bridge, doesn't it?
It does.
And another comes out onto, I think it's Coot Lane there to the south.
Chainhouse Lane, Coot Lane, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. And if we could read the key, it would read proposed primary vehicular something.
Routes, yes, I agree, sir.
Okay. Got better eyesight than I have. So 3 main vehicular access roads, and it shows, amongst other things, a route extending east-west across the site for part of that route following the B lane and crossing the West Coast main line to join Leyland Road at its roundabout.
Yes, sir.
All right. And I think it shows that those access points were also intended as bus routes that go through the site at that time. Is that right?
I would need to check the notes, but there should be no reason why they couldn't be.
I think that was the bit I couldn't read in the key. I think it says proposed primary vehicular and bus routes.
It's just checking the original document.
Well done.
Which is also a core document.
It is 10.79, I think.
And so on page 56 of said core document,
Yeah.
the key says proposed primary vehicular and bus routes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn that up so I can see it clearly. So perhaps it might be an idea for you to turn that up. So CD 10.79, and I can give you an internal page number as Mr. Thornton has confirmed. It's figure 11 on page 56 of that document. And you're right, Mr. Thornton, you can see the key much more clearly.
Just bear with me a moment.
Yes,
my
no,
document's
it's
still
going to
loading
take a
up.
while to load,
Yes,
I imagine.
yeah.
It's one of those.
What was the page? Page 56.
It's page 56. I don't think the page actually has a number on it, but page 55 does.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'll just wait for the inspector to get there.
Is this the only reason we're going to the document? Because it's taking its time.
It's not the only reason.
Okay, it's worth the wait then.
Leave others to judge.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Three.
And so that shows clearly those three primary vehicular and accesses and bus routes through the site then proposed, including the crossing of the West Coast Main Line. And if we just turn on in that document for a moment to page 79.
The PDF is a few pages further on, so you could just...
So page 79 of that document. It's a section number 10 headed Key Community Benefits.
81.
Yep.
I think the inspector's there, thank you very much. So key community benefits listed at that point. And there's a series of bullet points there set out. If we just find in the first column, the seventh of those, we see the subheading Link Road Delivery, don't we?
You do?
And it says that the development of the Pickerings farm site will enable the completion of a key highways link connecting Penwitham Way to Leyland Road, which is deliverable through the land controlled by Taylor Wimpey UK and the then Homes and Communities Agency.
I agree, sir.
So the master plan position, as advanced by the appellants when seeking an allocation of the land back in 2011 within the core strategy process, was that allocation would produce the remaining section of the Cross-Borough Link Road, wasn't it?
At the time of the submission of the 2011 document, yes.
Thank you very much. And more than that, it was being suggested that that would be done through land that was in the control of the appellants, wasn't it?
It was.
Just to be fair to you, and I know you're familiar with this document because presumably you had a hand in its preparation, didn't you?
I did.
Let's go back to page 36. Numbered page 36. Which is
41. PDF page.
Which is a
41.
document 11 years out of date now, sir.
oh no, I know what it's dated. I just want to understand how the site was being promoted in master planning terms at the time. So page 36 is within a section headed Deliverability of Development. Do you see that?
Mhm.
And we're told there, under the heading Land Ownership, that the majority of the site is currently controlled by the HCA and Taylor Wimpey. We're told about the extent of their control, ownership by HCA and option agreements at the hands of Taylor Wimpey. And it says that the HCA and Taylor Wimpey have reached agreement to work together as development partners to ensure that the site is developed in a timely and comprehensive manner. Land under control of those two parties enables the delivery of key infrastructure in a phased manner. So that's consistent with what we just looked at, that insofar as the rest of the link road was a bit of key infrastructure, that could be delivered through land under those two parties' control. Yeah? Yes?
2011, yes.
And then that little section goes on to note that the Homes and Communities Agency and Taylor Wimpey are confident that they will shortly obtain control over the outstanding small parcels of land within the site. That was what we were being told back in 2011. And continuing efforts would be made to negotiate with owners. All right. So that was the position back in 2011 in the run-up to trying to get this site allocated in the core strategy. The same exercise was gone through, wasn't it, in 2013, the core strategy having been adopted, land south of Penwortham identified as a strategic location. The same exercise was gone through in the preparation of South Ribble's local plan, again with a view to getting an allocation, wasn't it?
I can't confirm or deny that, but probably.
Well, hang on. I think you probably can confirm it, Mr. Thornton, because there's another development statement, isn't there? Dated February 2013, that effectively follows the 2011 document.
Okay.
And that's CD 1026. CD 1026. Just because, well, let me ask you this. Are you aware of the existence of that document?
I am.
Did you have a hand in its preparation?
Yes.
Can you confirm that it says exactly all of the same things that the 2011 document says that I've taken you to?
I probably I would need to check every line, but I will take your word for it because you've probably looked.
Well, if I'm wrong, Mr. Katkowski will shortly point that out.
That's right. If I'm interested in doing so.
If you are. So there we are. Again, in terms of, therefore, the local plan process in South Ribble, on the basis that it says exactly what was said in that 2011 document, we were being told, as was the inspector at the local plan inquiry examination, that the development of the Pickerings Farm site will deliver the remaining section of the link road, and that could be done by your clients through the land under their control.
It does say that, yes.
And we end up with the allocation in the 2015 adopted plan, don't we?
We do.
Let's have a quick look at the policy. I don't think there's anything probably between us in terms of this point, but let's turn up policy C1. So this is within core document 5.2 at page 25.
Are you going to the text of the policy?
Yes.
You'll need to open it up.
CD, it's Mr. Thornton, if you've got CD 5.2, I've got it in hard copy form, so it won't be page 25 on the PDF version. It's probably going to be 31, which is obviously what I was going to say. Thank you very much. Policy C1.
I have page
Pickerings
31.
Farm. And it's just really a short point in respect of the master plan requirement. obviously at sub-paragraph A of the policy, one of the conditions for the grant of consent in respect of development at the Pickerings Farm site allocation is the submission of an agreed master plan for the comprehensive development of the site. Obviously, there's no dispute that the site is talking about the allocation site covered by C1, and then it tells us that the master plan must include the wider area going down to Coot Lane and make provision for a range of land uses. And it tells us what those land uses should be. Just so I'm clear, it's not your case, is it, Mr. Thornton, that a master plan that simply meets those two requirements and in effect does nothing more should then be agreed by the council because it simply meets those two requirements? That's not your case.
That is the minimum requirement as set out before us. We have done more than that, yes.
That's not quite an answer to my question. Is it your case that if you were to have come along with a master plan that simply met those two requirements and did nothing more, it would have to be agreed by the council?
The master plan we submitted meets those points in the policy.
I'm going to have just one more go at that question. Assume you didn't come along with this.
You asked the planning witness with great respect. It's a question about a planning policy.
Yeah, I think the same point was put to effectively discuss with Dr. Price and put to him. So I'm just going to have one more go. And if you don't feel comfortable answering the question and it's for Mr. Alsbury, then do tell me. Ignore the master plan you produced. Assume you come along with a sheet of paper that had a drawing on it showing a site that extended down to Coot Lane and indicated that a range of uses would be developed on it. Would, in your view, the council have to agree that master plan because it meets A?
The council would have to test it against what is written in that policy.
All right. Note to Mr. Alsbury, I'm going to come back to that point with him.
Absolutely, no trouble, sir.
He's looking forward to it.
I'm sure he is. Something to look forward to next week. All right. Just one other aspect of that argument with you. There was a master plan before the council and indeed the local plan inspector during the course of the preparation of the local plan and at the point of adoption of the local plan, wasn't there? It was the one we've just looked at.
Yes, sir.
That extended down to Coot Lane and had a range of uses indicated on it.
It did.
Well, if that had been enough, what would have been the point of a requirement in policy saying submit a master plan?
It's a good question.
It is a good question, isn't it? What's the answer to that?
Certainly the policy plan just washes the entire site, so does not talk about the range of uses.
All right.
So yeah, the requirement is obviously to submit a master plan.
All right. Now, I think there was a little hiatus in activity, wasn't there, between adoption of the local plan and then the next exercise of producing the next iteration of the master plan, which I think you said you came back to in 2018.
Yes.
Okay. And if we just go back to your proof, this time I think it's paragraph 54, Mr. Thornton. Paragraph 54. You tell us about the if you like the process that was then involved in that exercise, and it culminated, you tell us at paragraph 54, in the submission of a master plan document in December 2019, which is in the court documents. I'm sure that we need to turn that up. Just so we understand that, if you like, the central change in approach, having seen that earlier effort, the central change in approach was the concept of keeping development traffic away from the existing lanes, wasn't it?
That is correct, sir.
That was the big change.
as the new policy map suggested.
And of course, that new approach meant that you had to come up with a way in which you could achieve that end, keeping traffic off the lanes. Yeah.
New traffic off the lanes.
New
yes.
traffic off the lanes, yeah. Now, I've already discussed the mechanics of all of that with Mr. Axon yesterday, so I'm not going to go over the mechanics of it with you. But let's just turn up the master plan, if we could, the current version of the master plan, CD 1.16, and I think it's page 8 that we're after. And I just picked this reference because it's possibly the first one really in the document that we find on this subject. There are one or two others. But in the, have you got to page 8 of the master plan?
How's that?
It's in a section that you've run through with your counsel in evidence in chief, dealing with the vision for the site. And the third column of text under the heading "A Place That Encourages Activity" says, amongst other things, the master plan, I'm looking in the middle of the paragraph, having said it needs to be easier to walk, cycle or use public transport to get to where you need to be. Presumably easier than getting in your car is what that means.
Yes.
Okay. It then says the master plan puts an emphasis on turning the existing lanes into sustainable pedestrian and cycle routes. The vast majority of new vehicular traffic will be prevented from using the existing lane. So there we have the introduction of this new approach, this big change from that previously advanced. What we can note there, of course, is that doesn't tell us how it's to be achieved, does it?
No, sir. It is a master plan.
I beg pardon?
It's a master plan. So
Yeah.
It's the principle.
And I mean, for what it's worth, we can turn on to page 13 of the document, where exactly the same statement appears. I think it's exactly the same statement appears under the heading Vision 5, where that aspect of the approach is returned to. And again, that doesn't tell us how it's to be achieved, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And in fact, I don't think the master plan explains anywhere how that new central approach for the master planning of the site is to be achieved, does it?
Not in detail, no.
Well, I don't think it tells us in any level of detail.
It sets out the principle. But
Yeah. Okay. Now, you'd obviously been mulling this over as a master planner with your clients, because I think there is an earlier version of the document. Sorry to take you through the various iterations, but there is at CD 7.8 an earlier version of the master plan document. That, you remember we referred to one submitted in 2019? Well, there's that one, isn't there?
There is.
So, sir, CD 7.8, December 2019, master plan. Just wait for the inspector's computer to load.
As is mine, slowly. I have that document.
Okay.
I'm just
Thank
a bit
you.
behind you, sorry. I don't know whether, are you there? sir?
I've got the document, yes.
Yes, page 10.
Page 10.
Internal pagination 10. Possibly 12,
13.
13 PDF, thank you, sir. So you clearly been giving this new approach some thought in the earlier master planning exercise, because at page 10 of this earlier iteration of the master plan, there's reference in the second column of text on this page to quiet lanes, isn't there?
There is.
And that's explained, that concept is explained in the rest of that column. And then in the third column, what are said to be a series of interventions to achieve that concept. I'm not too worried about the minor interventions, I'm more worried about the strategic ones, given that we're dealing with the master planning exercise. And there are three of them. This is what the appellants and presumably you as the master planning advisor to them were putting forward as the solutions to the new approach, keeping traffic off the lanes. Firstly, the truncation closure of existing lanes with conversion to pedestrian cycle bridleway access only. That approach is not pursued by the appellants now, as it clearly would have been unacceptable to occupiers of existing properties.
Absolutely, this is a previous version not under examination, and this was consulted on, and obviously residents were interested in access to their properties, and that has been superseded.
The second, to be fair to you, says access only and other traffic management arrangements, which is what you've gone with now, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
But again, in this document, there's no detail as to how that was to be achieved. And the third, I think, the adoption of a one-way operation along the lanes, again, abandoned.
Yes. Now, this is a historic document. This is not the document being reviewed.
I'm just getting some context, Mr. Thornton. Thank you very much.
Maybe other interesting things in there.
I'm not going to go over the mechanics and the possible effectiveness of the solutions now proposed. There was a solution proposed in the design and access statement, which involves some bollards. Mr. Axon has augmented that with some further materials in his proofs. I'm not going to talk about the degree to which they make manoeuvres difficult with you. If, however, the Inspector and the Secretary of State conclude that the measures now advanced by the appellant are unlikely to succeed to an acceptable degree, and development traffic is able to use the lanes to a material degree, that would undermine, wouldn't it, a central component of the current master plan?
If it were possible, it might, but the intention is to prevent that.
But I'm asking you as a master planner, assuming Mr. Axon's solutions don't work, from your master planning perspective, that would undermine a central component of the approach, wouldn't it?
It would put more traffic on the lanes, yes.
Is the yes an answer to my question? Yes, it would undermine a central
component. It wouldn't undermine a central tenet of it. The benefit of a master plan with multiple connections is that there is choice. There are many walking routes, there are many public rights of way that do not have vehicular access. So on the component of the lanes, there would be, if traffic could get there, an increase in traffic. But that coexists in a number of locations. So it may not.
Just whilst we have, I hope you still have that earlier iteration of the master plan on your computer. Could you find page 45 just to pick up one other reference within it whilst we have it to hand? It's page 45.
PDF page 48.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's not the development statement, is it?
No, it's the last document we were looking at, so which is CD 7.8.
Right.
The figure 8.
Yep.
Yes, it's the page contains figure 8, the wider road network.
Yeah.
Just wait for the inspector to get there, Mr. Thornton.
Yeah, my document is taking a while to get that far through it, but I can observe it on Mr. Karkowski's screen.
That's all right. Let's all get there.
Observe away.
Get 8. Good. Yep, I've got it.
Thank you, sir.
Eventually.
Poor technology is creaking this morning. There's some other things. So, page 45, figure 8 shows, as Mr. Katkowski has said, it shows the wider road network, and it also shows a red dotted line across the site, and that's indicated as the potential CBLR route in the key, isn't it?
It is.
And in the text above that, there is reference to the Crossborough Link Road extension, isn't there? Above figure 8.
Yes.
And the first paragraph concludes that, well, it says that in accordance with policy A2, an extension to the CBLR is required. CBLR extension will be a primary route through the site from Penwitham Way, linking to the Causey to the northeast. As part of the development proposals, the CBLR extension will be delivered in phases. Do you see that?
Do.
And I don't know if we need to turn this up. I'm just tracking through what was being said by your client in previous versions. You remember we looked at the very early versions of the master plan, what was being said about the CBLR there. So we've seen what was said in that 2019 version of the master plan in respect to the CBLR. We then fast forward to 2020, which is yet another iteration of the master plan, isn't it, that was submitted to the council for its approval. Call that?
Yes.
So for your note, that's CD 7.10. I don't want to waste time perhaps turning that up, but we can note that the same reference is made as in that 2019 document to the CBLR being delivered in phases as part of the development.
But for the master plan document, yes.
And that was page 47 of the 2020 version of the master plan, CD 7.10. So that was the picture in that iteration of the master plan that came through 2019, 2020. CBLR will be delivered in phases as part of the development. And that was the master plan that was rejected by the council in September 2020, wasn't it?
Indeed.
Okay. The next iteration of the master plan that we get to is this one.
And there is good reason for iteration, because we have listened to the council, we have developed the master plan. Elements have changed, elements have stayed the same. The connection to Coot Lane is of great interest that we started with, but it was the council that asked us to remove that connection, for example. So there has been certainly iteration.
Oh, there have been changes.
Yes.
One of the changes is that this version of the master plan says absolutely nothing at all about the development of the Crossborough Link Road in phases as part of the development, does it?
Probably not, no.
No, it doesn't, Mr. Thornton, as you well know. And so we're clear about how the emphasis has changed. Let's turn up page 19 of the current master plan, CD 1.16. That was inevitable. Page 19 of the master plan.
Page 19.
Hang on a minute. No, I'm not sure that's right. Just bear with me a second. bear with me. You'll probably be able to take me to the reference because I'm not sure page 19 is the right one. Oh, hang on a minute. Helps if I look in the master plan as opposed to the design and access statement, I suppose, doesn't it? Let me have another go at page 19.
Of
The master plan.
the master plan stuff.
It's all right, Mr. Katkoff, see, I'm getting there just
No, don't.
at my own pace.
That's fine. I'm slower than you.
Yeah,
so-
I think that it is the right reference. It's the last little paragraph of text on the page. So instead of talking about its delivery through the development, we now have a little reference at the end of this section on page 19 that simply says the master plan addresses the requirement of Part B of Policy A2 as it protects land from physical development to allow for the delivery of the full CBLR. Okay?
It does.
Why the change?
The planning policy context section is generally authored by the planning consultant. So that text we put into the document, but it was provided to us on policy by the planning team.
Shall I ask my questions on that point to Mr. Alsbury?
You may.
There are other bits of this master plan that you didn't write, or are responsible for the rest of it?
We were overall pulling it all together. There
Okay.
are many aspects, technical
Okay.
and otherwise, that we pull together as master planners. We don't author it all.
Okay. Page one other aspect on the master plan that I want to ask you about that you touched upon in your evidence in chief. And that's buses. So if we turn on to page 22 of the document,
Proof or the master plan?
master plan. This is in a section numbered 5 on access and movement. And if we look at the third column of text, Mr. Thornton, we have in the second paragraph reference to the new vehicular site access from Penwitham Way. And then in the second half of that paragraph, we're told that access can be provided for a new or extended bus service servicing the site accessing via Penwitham Way with an internal loop provided to ensure good penetration and access to services. And it talks about the fact that there are already existing services off-site. Okay. And there's no more detail than that with regard to the provision of public transport within the master plan, is there?
In footnotes, in keys, in other references, but that's probably the prime text, yes.
Okay. And in particular, we're not told what will happen as far as the provision of public transport is concerned in the event that you can't form your loop.
But this is the master plan document setting out the principal overall configuration for how the whole site comprehensively would conform.
Okay.
Yes.
There's no suggestion here of any access for buses being gained to the site via B lane, is there?
Not in the master plan, no.
Now we know that that has appeared as a proposal.
Part of the phasing to develop the
Yeah.
master plan.
When did that idea emerge?
There is continuous discussion with bus operators with the Vectos team, so it is an element that has come on since Vectos have been working with us.
Okay. So that emerged sometime last year, did it?
It did.
Okay. And you referred in your evidence in chief to the prospect of a bus gate to get
Yes.
from B lane onto the Spine Road, I think.
It did.
Have we seen any proposals for that?
It is referred to in Mr. Axon's evidence.
Yeah. Have you seen
We have discussed
in
and it
graphic
is,
terms
yes,
how that might be
it is
achieved?
incorporated into the phasing and infrastructure diagrams, which are an appendix of either either
Mr. Alsbury's proof.
Mr. Alsbury's proof or potentially other documents.
It might be that I missed where that's shown. Let's have a look at Mr. Alsbury's Appendix 2, shall we? Have you got that available?
It's a chunky one to load, we shall see. Unless Mr. Alsbury has a copy. Okay. Indicative phasing plans, July 2022.
They've got
There is a separate core document with that appendices.
I think.
Is there a
Yeah, no,
particular
I think Mr.
phase?
Alsbury's appendices are in the core documents, are in the same as his proof, probably.
Yeah, I think it is. I have the one that is a separate core document.
If you're looking at a plan, can you, sorry, Mr.
No, not
Walter,
at all.
can you just indicate when you get to the plans which phase plan you're, or whatever it is, give us some way of finding it, please.
Have you got Mr. Alsbury's Appendix 2?
I have a document which is entitled.
It's the I can see
think
it's
it is
the
the
same
same.
as Mr.
Is it?
Alsbury's.
It's Indicative Scheme Phasing and Implementation Plan, draft for discussion, July 22.
Yes, I have that.
And I think that's where you told us we might find the
we
the solution for the bus gate.
page 11 of the PDF.
What's the title?
The title of that one is Phase 1.
Phase
It's
Phase
the first plan in the indicative phasing plan section.
Oh, it's the 3 beige dots.
It is the 3 orange dots below the A to the right of B. Yes.
That's the level of detail with regard to the solution for getting buses from the B lane to the Spine Road, is it, that we had before the inquiry?
That is the indicated physical location. Yes.
Super. All right. Thank you very much. Last general point, please. The current master plan, as well as all of the other iterations that we've gone through, have been prepared by these 2 appellants, haven't they?
Yes.
And we know that they control about 2/3 of the allocated site. Yeah.
We do.
Through direct ownership or options, and therefore the remaining third is not in the appellant's control. Is that right?
That's correct. To my knowledge.
Now, we know, casting our minds back, that back in 2011 we were being told that your clients were confident they would shortly gain control over the rest of the land. That hasn't gone well, has it?
Overly confident, sir.
That hasn't gone well.
They do not control, well, in fact, they have control over slightly less land than in 2011, yes.
Is there any evidence? You talked about the consultation, public participation that was undertaken in respect to the preparation of master plan. Is there any evidence that the owners of the remaining roughly 1/3 agree with this master plan?
Certainly was a public consultation exercise with respondents, and I'm to a certain extent blind as to who responded, but I have talked to both landowners and non-landowners, in particular to the lower end of Moss Lane. I have spoken to a number of landowners not in the consortium about their just how the scheme would impact them, so we have discussed at length with them.
Yeah, so my question is there any evidence that those other landowners, the ones not in the happy group of consortium, agree with your master plan?
I haven't specifically categorised the responses into owners and not owners. I've done that relatively blind.
So the answer is no.
There
There
may
isn't
well
any
be.
evidence.
There may well be.
There might be, but there's none before this inquiry.
I can go and sift and have a look, but you're right.
Okay.
We haven't brought any before you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Thornton. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Punter. Thank you. Bear with me one moment, Mr. Thornton. I think I've just got a couple of quick questions that really emerged from my site visit and relate to Mr. Ponter's last points there about ownership. And the master plan shows two things that I wasn't quite sure why they'd been put in those positions, and perhaps you could just explain those to me. First is the bus route, the primary route that runs across Flag Lane, I think it is.
It does.
Now, I may have that wrong, but it appeared to me on site that that was going through some of the existing buildings on site that aren't in your control. Is that
The route there looks to go between buildings and the farm ownership boundary to the east of that there. So yes, there is a route there, but it's not through the buildings.
sorry? It's not.
It's not through the buildings, but that would be for the redevelopment of that parcel as it comes forward to review.
Okay, so there's if I remember correctly, that when you walk along that lane from west to east, there's paddocks at the junction. You have some paddocks,
Yes.
and then some stable buildings of some sort, and then the boundary to the adjacent house. So whereabouts is that showing coming through there?
The master plan itself, in terms of the stable block and grounds next to it, assumes residential development on that parcel of land, and therefore would assume that that use in due course would be replaced with residential.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And you said earlier, I think it was actually in your evidence in chief, about the orchard being moved back to where it was. Now, I haven't looked through various different iterations, but what is it about the orchard being there that is particularly relevant?
It is more of a reaction to working closely with the council in terms of some of their reasons for refusal, that they wanted to see those orchards protected. We have 2 orchards designated on site. One, the large orange square, kind of centre right of the master plan. It's a historic orchard. It is not in great condition, but the principle to keep that master plan instead of using it for residential was something requested which could be achieved, and so that was kept. Similarly, there is a second orchard element up to the west of the school proposed site, which is in the curtilage, the rear of a residential property on Moss Lane, and again that is also designated orchard, so they were retained.
So that's existing as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Katkowski?
Yes, just a couple of points, if I may. Mr. Thornton, can we just at the other side of the equation to questions which were asked at the end of my learned friend Mr. Ponter's examination of you. You'll recall, was there any evidence before the inquiry that the other landowners on the site agree with the master plan? You said, well, no, there's no evidence before the inquiry. Have you seen any evidence before the inquiry that the remaining landowners disagree with the master plan and object to it?
I have not.
No, thank you. The only other point I wanted to ask you is when you were being asked about the master plan document itself and the reference in it, I can't remember whether it's a single reference or more than one, but anyway, reference in it to inhibiting access from the new development by vehicles to the existing lanes, and it was put to you and you agreed, there's no detail as to how that could be achieved in the master plan, and you said in response to that, in the master plan sets out the principle, not in detail, no, but it sets out the principle, is what you said. So can you just have some help us, please, as the role of the master plan, because we might recall we had a number of observations made last week by Dr. Price that he personally would have liked to have seen more detail of this, that and the other and something else. Can you just help us, please, with the role of the master plan and to what extent it should set out details of that nature?
The master plan is a framework. It is covering many different landowners, different links, adopted road, non-adopted roads, public rights of way. And so the master plan is a comprehensive framework which sets out principles and visions and purposefully doesn't go into detail because that is for other applications later down the road, whether that be by outline or reserved matters. So the master plan is a high-level framework document to make sure that when one parcel of land is looked at next to another parcel of land, that things join up, so that there's no disconnect between the many different adjoining owners.
Good. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Thornton. So that's Mr. Thornton's evidence.
Thank you very much indeed.
We've certainly finished this morning, sir.
Yes, thank you for your contribution, Mr. Thornton. Appreciate it. Good. Right, well, that's a nice early finish for today then.
Marvellous.
Just a couple of points before we adjourn to run through. I just wanted to run through the timetable for next week, if we could. So Tuesday is currently proposed as having Mr. Alsbury's evidence, and the initial indications were examination in chief of an hour and cross-examination of an hour and a half. We're not going to go beyond the morning.
Doesn't look like it, does it? If we start at 9:30. Bear with me one moment, sir. Yeah, I mean, I would hope to bring Mr. Alsbury in, circa an hour, even if it's a little bit longer. We're still going to be fine, aren't we, for the morning? So yes. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether we'll be able to get everyone around for doing the Section 106 and conditions in the afternoon, rather than coming back the next day just for that. Depends on.
I simply don't know. So, I mean, conditions are given that a schedule or schedules have gone to you today. Then, as long as the individual's available, I mean, on this side of the room, my planning witness will be here anyway because he would have been talking in the morning. So, I should imagine that we'll be all right on conditions. But obviously, I don't know about.
Yes, well, I think from the Borough Council's perspective, that the same goes for us.
Of course.
What I don't really know about is whether the county council can be present on Tuesday to do that. I've asked the council to, if you like, put the county council on notice that their presence is required. So it'll be Mr. Stevens probably and a legal officer from the county council to attend the conditions and, what importantly, the Section 106 discussion.
Yes.
And I know that they have been informed of that. They're aware of their requirement to be here, and they've got Wednesday morning penciled in.
Shall we,
Okay.
I mean, as I
So
understand
we can stick with that
well, we
if
can,
necessary.
but I mean, why don't we, you know, at least have a go to see whether they could come along on Tuesday afternoon?
Yeah.
Because I'm informed, I mean, I haven't looked at any of this myself, that the real bones of contention about the conditions are the county's stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you could bear to adjourn shortly now, we can try and make contact and see if they've got availability on Tuesday. So, and then, I mean, the alternative is we adjourn now and then we try and let you know through other means. But
That would be absolutely fine if you were
Okay.
just able to let me know by email that, and everyone else know by email.
Yes.
That would just mean that we could wrap everything up on the Tuesday, fingers crossed, and with,
and you're
with a fair
imagining
wind.
that we would run onto the section 106 as well on Tuesday?
If possible, yes.
Could it be the same?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, from the county's perspective, you've mentioned having a county solicitor.
Yes, yeah.
So Mr.
Yes, it wouldn't make sense. I don't think it would make sense to leave the 106 unless we were going to leave it for the day we come back for closing. Otherwise,
Well, and that's a bit too tight then, isn't it?
We'd be available, but Mr. Lloyd would be available
Okay.
That's
as well.
helpful.
Yeah.
Right.
well,
okay.
we'll check with the. I'm sure there's no difficulty from the borough's perspective,
Mhm.
and we'll check with the county and circulate an email to let everyone know.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, if we
I know what's
if
coming
that
next.
does go ahead,
I know what's coming next.
I would then suggest perhaps that the Wednesday.
It's our writing day.
Yes, exactly.
But-
And I would then revisit parts of the site that
Yes.
I feel I want to revisit, and potentially coming back on the Thursday then for closings.
Yeah.
If we're to do that, sir, I would just ask whether we could, I mean, a bit like the day after the bank holiday, whether we could actually do that at, say, 1 o'clock on the Thursday rather than first thing, for various reasons, which I'm not going to bore you with. So, if that would be fine.
Yep,
Or
I'm
right.
I'm content with that. It would just be helpful if we were able to finish the one day early.
Agreed.
But
Yes, let's bring this in a week and a day early. So. I
yes.
don't know, do you get
Yep.
points for that, sir,
Yeah.
back at headquarters? Or customer satisfaction, 5 stars. No,
So
thank
just
you.
on your site visit, can I just, whilst it's in my mind, if you're going back to do some further viewing activity, there was Mr. Stevens' suggestion that as part and parcel of that, you have the pleasure of some peak hour journeys.
Yes, I've got that noted down.
Thank you very much. I'll say no more about it.
Have you got a sat nav in your cars?
Right. Okay. No, nothing else suggested for the site. But anyway, if there is anything suggested for the site visit, then that can be brought to my attention before then.
So we'll try and let everyone know. We'll try and contact the county today and
Yeah.
let everyone know today
Yep.
whether
Mhm.
it needs to stay with Wednesday or we can.
And if it
Yep.
does stay with Wednesday, then so presumably we would have our writing down on Thursday. and
Yes.
close
Yeah. We
on
just
Friday
revert to
morning.
normal timetable then. Yep. Yep. Okay. Good. Right. Thank you for that. And just to confirm then. The documents that I'm expecting. Let me know if I've got this wrong. So the draft section 106 by close of play today, and then the final version by Monday morning. Is I think
was
what
that
we said
offered?
yesterday.
Yes, that records from my recollection as well. I thought we'd said Monday morning for the section 106.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
For the final version of
Well,
that.
I'm not
It's
sure
just-
whether the interim's going to be of any use to you, to be honest.
Okay.
sir,
If
because
there
with
is no
respect,
use, then
because I
then
think we've been
yeah.
struggling to actually find time with the county to discuss matters. So
okay.
anyway, so
Right.
yes, can we say Monday, as we did indeed?
Yep.
Say Monday morning, if that's all right. So I know that doesn't give you long, but we are where we are. I'm
I'll
afraid.
do what I can. That's fine. And that will be still compliance on Monday as well.
Yes.
won't it? Yes. Okay. And Mr. Alsbury said earlier that conditions are already
You've
with
got them,
the
so
inspectorate,
it's
I will,
understanding, yeah.
yep, along with the building heights position. Mr. Kukoski, you offered yesterday a note on the 100% issue.
Oh yes, it's very
just-
simple, sir.
yep.
We've got a note, and Mr. Atson was keen to tease my learned friend by writing 20 pages before coming to the punchline, but the punchline is there's a missing line in the table.
Okay, right.
And we will provide, we're going to put the missing line on the table on a piece of paper, presumably, or however you're doing it.
What is
Mr.
it? It's
Atson.
people on scooters or something, is it?
I don't know, what was it?
Walking.
Walking.
Right.
Walking from home. So it was WFH, but it was walking rather than working.
Okay.
So that's
pretty straightforward
that,
then.
but we'll
Yep.
put that on a piece of paper. But now that's the answer.
Okay, thank you for that.
And there's a response to KBLR, which Mr. Atson, you're working on it now, literally now. Okay. So that would be with you. I mean, as soon as it's ready, we just submit it. So I think I'd said something, but at the time when I thought Wednesday was our last session before the closings, I said Wednesday, but we've got to make sure it's in on Tuesday at the latest. Yeah, no problem. So I'm told.
Right. Yep. Thank you. Right. And I think, Mr. Ponte, you'd indicated that you may wish to respond to the written version
Yes.
of Mr. Axon's evidence in chief.
Yes. I'd reserve my position, I think, as far as that is concerned, on the
Yep.
basis that there did appear to be a new point there that wasn't put to Mr. Stevens, namely the pressing of the uncertainty button. So, in particular, I highlighted. Mr. Stevens has gone away to think about whether or not he needs to say anything more about that. We'll be able to update you by email, I'm assuming by Monday.
Okay. Thank you. Any other matters?
No, so not from me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Nothing, sir.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, it's 7 minutes past 11. Time to adjourn. We'll come back on Tuesday at 9:30. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, sir.
Have a good weekend.
You
And
too.
to you, sir. Thank you.